Disappointing performance on Saturday. Not the start that anybody associated with our team, fans, or anybody inside the building wanted to deal with.
That was West Virginia head coach Neil Brown in his Tuesday press conference. Coming off last week's 30-24 loss to Maryland, he's optimistic headed into week 2.
As we move forward, we got to learn from it and grow. We didn't perform very well, and we're judged on games. That's the way it is in this business. We're all, big people here, and one game won't run a season.
We're a week into the college football season. West Virginia last week didn't look that great. I'm Jared Sari along with Keenan Cummings. This is Musings from the Mountains. And we're going to break down last week's West Virginia fiasco at Maryland, as well as looking ahead to this weekend against LIU. But honestly, Keenan, that was a hell of a game to watch last week, yeah?
Yeah, if you like angry West Virginia fans, it was kind of exactly what people wanted to see. Obviously, I'm being facetious, but, for all the talk this offseason, I could not help but walk away, and not just me. I think it's pretty much universally anybody that covers this team, anybody that follows this team, walk away disappointed. I think Neil Brown hit the nail on the head. West Virginia lost this game 30-24. He had 4 turnovers and so many self-inflicted errors, on defense, communication breakdowns with veteran players, missed tackles, things that really have not been a staple of this team and really kind of, the program under Neil Brown. Yes, they've had issues with some penalties before, but, it was not pretty. I think obviously, the elephant in the room is the play of Jarret Doege. For all the talk, and it wasn't just the coaches talking either. I thought he looked better in spring practice. I thought he looked better in the fall, especially fall camp. And I wasn't alone in that belief. I think pretty much universally shared by most members of the media that were there for practice. He looked much more confident. Of course, we weren't seeing him getting hit. The bullets weren't flying necessarily. But once they did, it was really, really hard to kind of take some of those positive comments and look at it, objectively, because, he had one throw on his 21 completions, according to Pro Football Focus, that was actually considered an excellent ball location with timing, or in a tight window of the 21. He only had one pass completed over 20-plus yards in the air. And, yes, some of that could have been a game plan. But, I don't think that necessarily, you can go down the list and look at some of these issues on the offense. But, it starts with your quarterback. And I think I said this on the message board today. When I think about the things that I guess would be most frustrating about the performance, at least from my perspective, is, yes, the offensive line struggled at times, but he was kept clean on 71% of his dropbacks. And several times, we had heard a lot about moving in the pocket, things he had proved upon, climbing the ladder, that kind of thing. And at times it was almost as if he was seeing ghosts and climbing into pressure. The just awful interception he threw. I actually have no issues at all with the second one. I think anybody that does is kind of just nitpicking. That was a fantastic play by the Maryland DB. You don't typically break off on your coverage. Yeah, you can probably say that, Ford Wheaton maybe wasn't selling it as much, but kid made a play. That happens. The first one, though, that was awful. It was an awful throw, and there's no defending that, and I don't think anybody's tried to. So it puts us in an interesting conundrum, Jared. Well, not us. We don't have to make a decision, but
yeah, we just have to, we just got to push content out there that Blue Lotters will read. So far, that's a lot easier said than done. But I wanted to echo your point about Jarret Doege's play. Not great. And, I'm going back and looking at the stats again right now. I think it hurts a lot more knowing that directly across the field from him, Taulia Tagovailoa put forth an incredible game. Yeah, he does have arguably the best receiving core to play with that the Mountaineers will face all year. But, 332 yards, 3 touchdowns for him. And then you look at Daggy, a complete 180. It's not great. And, I've, as high as I've been on Daggy this fall, I'd like to see him improve. And I bought in, I drank the Kool-Aid that, Sean Reagan made us. But it was disappointing to watch. And I understand that as reporters, we're supposed to be unbiased, but I would not be happy if I was a West Virginia fan, and rightfully so. But I mean, the issues aren't just offensively. What did you see defensively that is cause for concern heading into week 2?
Cause for concern, really, I mean, I think really when you look at it, it was an opener. I think Maryland hit them. Maryland really kind of surprised me, and I think most people that were watching the game initially with how much tempo they used, how effectively they used it, the way they were able to get West Virginia on the edges and make things happen. It didn't look like West Virginia was prepared for that. It really, and once they adjusted, they settled in. It's hard for me to sit there and nitpick about, getting beat. If a guy gets beat technically, that's going to happen, especially at cornerback position. The communication issues, though, are alarming. There's, I think, 2 or 3 big passes in that game that were directly related to either a missed signal, not being on the same page, relaying it player to player, and that just can't happen when most of your secondary is experienced. So moving forward, though, I mean, it seems almost crazy to say this. West Virginia gave up almost 500 yards, I believe, and 30 points, but I walked away feeling pretty optimistic about what the defense can do if they can stay, disciplined and aligned and do the correct things pre-snap to put them in position to have, success once the play begins. I wasn't necessarily worried as much about that unit. Obviously time will tell, but I do see the makings of another possible good season for the defensive unit. How about you?
Yeah, something that really shocked me in that game was Dante Stills and Alonzo Adai together combined 6 tackles. 6 tackles between arguably the top most valuable defensive players the Mountaineers have this season. You cannot allow that to happen and expect to win games. And that, I understand that is obvious, but that really hurt West Virginia, especially going up against Rakeem Jarrett, Dante Demas, these stellar wideouts. If Adai can't contain them, and if Dante Stills can't apply pressure, it's not going to end well. And that's exactly what we saw Saturday. This is a good transition, I feel, heading into this week against LIU, a really bottom of the barrel team. I think this week ahead will be very, very good for West Virginia in terms of just building that confidence back after such a dumpster fire of a game.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. I mean, when you really think about it, I think that's why people are so upset. Had West Virginia just gone out and looked terrible against Maryland, then yeah, I think people would just kind of be shell-shocked. But it's the fact that they kind of those self-inflicted mistakes that put them in that position. And I do agree with you about the pressure. I'm remiss not to even mention that. West Virginia was not really able to affect, Maryland when they dropped back to throw the ball. Of course, a lot of their stuff had a lot of different reads, trying to get the ball out quickly, which took some of those, tackle numbers out because really you square up and tackle and you should have made the play before it gets to the safety a lot of times. But West Virginia struggled to get guys to the ground. But yeah, I mean, you ever needed a booster shot of confidence, this should be the team to do it. No disrespect to Long Island in the slightest, but this is an FCS team transitioning to FCS. You look at their roster, I do a breakdown every week, and I've done it for the last 8 to 10 years of, what guys were rated as recruits. I'm not going to give you all the details, but spoiler alert, this was the worst team I've seen yet. They had one player that was even rated on the entire roster of their entire 2 deep, which speaks to how much West Virginia should have an advantage in this game. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on that aspect. I think, there's really no reason to do it. If West Virginia's not able to win this game, they've got a lot bigger problems than if Garrett Green should start. So I don't think that that's the issue necessarily, but I do agree with Neil Brown when he said, this week's about West Virginia. They have to show improvement. And you're not going to compare it. Don't mistake what he's saying or what I'm implying here either. No one's going to say, if Jarret Doege goes out and goes 21 for 22 with 4 touchdowns in the first half, that, oh, he's fixed it. No, nobody's saying that. It's about making improvement, though. You've got to be able to show that, when you are supposed to take care of an opponent, you can do it. When you can finish a drive in the red zone, do it. Don't turn the ball over. Don't make silly mistakes. Don't try to audible, a play call with 9 seconds left from the sideline and not have a timeout. I mean, that right there was another one of those head-scratching moments. You cannot try to do that late in the play clock. But I think this week's about West Virginia. We're going to see a lot of new guys, I think. I mean, obviously, I think this is going to be very similar to the game last year against Eastern Kentucky. A lot of new faces, a lot of different guys on the field, and really some burn for some guys that we've been waiting to see. I think you'll see a lot of Justin Johnson, Sam Brown, you go down the list, guys that people have wanted to see play that necessarily didn't get to play against Maryland. So when I look at this, I think it's an opportunity for West Virginia not to wipe the slate clean. You can't do that in college football. You're 0-1. Neil Brown discussed that. They kind of had to accept that reality. But I do think that there is an opportunity to make a step forward.
Right. I would agree wholeheartedly. But I wanted to touch real quick on what you said about a lot of young guys playing. This is a rollover game if we're going to be entirely honest. I fully anticipate West Virginia to, I wouldn't be surprised if one of the walk-ons lined up at quarterback at the end of the game. But I wanted to ask you your thoughts, Keenan. What young guy do you think could put together some quality snaps this weekend, and maybe, a week from now against Virginia Tech or when we start Big 12 play, that guy could seriously be a starting player?
Starting, I'm not going to go that far because it's just too early in the season. But I think that, some guys that are going to play that have a chance for bigger roles. And I think if you ask the coaches, honestly, they tell you they wish they would have got him in more. But, I think Justin Johnson's an obvious one. Caden Prather, Wyatt's going to play more at right tackle, which he had kind of his welcome to college football moment against Maryland. There's no shame in that. Guy's a true freshman. Sometimes that happens. That's how you learn. There's no other way to learn other than getting out there and doing it. I think you see some of these young safeties too that they've talked about. If I had to pick a guy, I guess, a guy that's going to springboard himself, I think it would probably be Johnson, just because it really depends on Matthew. If he plays, that could rain on it a little bit. But there's a lot of guys that just did not see the field, against Maryland that we were expecting to. I mean, not even necessarily just freshmen. Charles Woods got 1 snap. They played three safeties. I think it was 84 snaps Maryland had. They played 3 safeties, all of them but one. And on that 1 snap, Scotty Young got injured. So they might have won the whole game playing those guys. Dante Stills, I think, played 93% of the snaps. Taj Austin was like 77. That can't happen. You can't do that over a season. It's not going to work. So I think you're going to be forced to play some of these guys. Some of these young guys on the defensive line. The secondary. So there's a lot of opportunities here. Do I think that a guy that is just going to magically emerge from game 2 to game 3? Probably not. Do I think that a guy could set himself up to platform later in the year? Absolutely. And that's what these games are for. You get some of the frustration out from a week ago. You go out, put some good drives together, play some good defense, and then you try to get your young guys some valuable reps, because you look at the schedule. Neil Brown mentioned it. Other people have mentioned it. A lot of toss-up games on here. There's not a lot of opportunities to do this. So this is your one kind of shining moment to get those young guys playing time in an actual game and see how they play. Because as we've all seen, the message board's been buzzing about this all week over the Blue Lot. Practice does not make a player necessarily, with Jarret Doege's struggles in the game compared to how he had been apparently playing practice settings. So interesting. I do want to flip this back to you, Jared. How much do we see Garrett Green this weekend? I mean, he's going to play, obviously. If he doesn't, something's terribly wrong with West Virginia, as I mentioned before. When does he come in? How long does he play? Does Neil get an extended look at him?
That's always, that's the $1 million question there, Keenan. I would be, that's tough because, as much as we would like to sit here and say, Jarret Doege has played poorly, we've also seen that Neil Brown will stick with his guys. And, this is, if I can go off on a tangent real quick, I remember, you may also remember this, a couple months ago, I wrote a brief opinion piece about 3 things that I was worried about heading into this season. I got so much crap for it. And one of them is arguably looking to shape out right. And I said, I was worried that Neil Brown would switch to Garrett Green before it was too late. That Neil Brown would stick with Jarret Doege too long and would not switch to Garrett Green until it was too late. So far, that is maybe a couple weeks down the line. But my DMs on Twitter are open if anybody would like to apologize for coming at my throat about that. But going back to your initial question, halftime, maybe best case scenario, I would think, for Garrett Green to come in and play. I mean, you got to look at this also. Yeah, you do want to play the young guys, but at the same time, this is probably a big game for Jarret Doege trying to develop that confidence back. I mean, we spoke to him ahead of the Maryland game, and he seemed like he was in a much better headspace, much more confident than he was at the end of last season, especially after the Liberty Bowl. But now we're back in the season. Now he's facing live reps. Who knows where he's at mentally right now? I think Garrett Green is a lock to play. It really just depends on, what Neil Brown's game plan is. But I think the best thing for the football team, let Doege do his thing the first half, let Garrett Green do his thing the second half, get the Caden Prathers and the Davis Mallingers in the world, let them do their thing, dance around on the field in the second half. And, I think we'll be looking up at the end of the game. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we get into some game day predictions?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think an interesting scenario. I mean, just from, obviously I understand people are upset and people are emotional right now. Happen when you lose a game, you feel like you should have won. Maryland necessarily hasn't been a beacon of success the last couple of years, but I'll be very interested to see the reaction if Garrett Green comes out and plays well, even in a backup limited role in the second half, and then Doege struggles early against Virginia Tech. I think that could lead to some very interesting crowd reactions. I thought it was interesting, too, that Neil Brown, made it a point in his press conference to thank the fans and say, I hope you haven't given up on me, because I don't think people have given up. People are frustrated, but it's a good thing in a sense. Not a good thing people are frustrated, but a good thing that they're so emotional, because it tells you that people really care about it. And I don't think that performance is necessarily going to doom the program by any means. I've had people ask me about recruiting implications. West Virginia's lost to Maryland before. They've lost to Virginia Tech before. They've still beaten them out for recruits. The same thing goes the other way. So that's necessarily not going to be something that, you have to worry about per se. But I have written about this a few times, and I do think it's very, very important jumping ahead a week, which I feel like, again, no disrespect to Long Island, but everybody's eyes are kind of on Virginia Tech right now. That's a game Neil has to win. It's not his fault. Dana couldn't take care of business against some of those regional rivals in the years before Neil got here. But fans don't get a lot of these games, and when they get them, they want to win them. And I think that's a big reason why everybody's taking the Maryland game so hard, because it's a game many thought West Virginia would win going into it, and you fell face first. So we'll be interested to see the crowd reaction. I'll be interested to see how things fold out here from here on out. I don't think anybody, you or I, are suggesting, Garrett Green's going to supplant Jarrett Doege at this point. I don't think that's what anybody's suggesting, but I do think you need to get him some reps just in case. And I also think that if you're not going to play him, you need to at least take advantage of his skill set in the red zone. They had some packages for him last year. They only got to it one time, I believe, against Iowa State, but get his athleticism on the edge. If you're going to run that zone read stuff in the red zone, it makes a lot more sense. You have to have a guy that's actually a threat to pull it and run. So that's going to be something I track, moving forward to see, how that evolves and what happens with that. But in terms of game predictions, spoiler alert, I'm going to speak for you here. There's no way anybody in this is taking Long Island. How do you think this is going to turn out, Jared? Is this going to be Eastern Kentucky-esque? Are you going to have to kind of worry about it a little bit like James Madison?
I think I'm gonna do you one better, Keenan. So growing up, I was raised an Ohio State Buckeye fan. The first college football game I ever went to, Ohio State hosted FCS school Florida A&M in Columbus. Final score of that game, 76-10. I don't think it'll be that big of a blowout, but I think it'll be up there. I think Garrett Green will enter the game in a sense because West Virginia is up so much, and I think he will see considerable time. If Winston Wright can play half as good as he did last week, if Jarrett Doege can, not have these fluke interceptions, and if West Virginia can just hold on to the ball, it's going to be an absolute slobber knocker, an absolute bloodbath. Turn the TV off at halftime, take a nap. You're not going to miss anything. I don't even want to put a number on this because I don't think you can predict such a blowout. Would you agree?
I think FIU almost scored 50 on these guys. FIU. I think Neil Brown can, I don't want to say name his score because West Virginia has not proven it's that type of football team yet, but some of this might come down to Neil Brown's mercy in a sense. How much does he want to push the gas pedal? Will he fall off? I don't think there's any threat of West Virginia to win this game. There always is any game. I mean, anything could happen, but this would be probably the biggest upset that, at least since I've been covering the team, if somehow Long Island could pull this off. So I like West Virginia. Obviously, I like West Virginia big. And as I said already, we're kind of biding our time right now to get to next week with Virginia Tech, because I think that is a monumental game for the program, not only for Trust Klein building it for this current year, but for future years, because as I mentioned before, this is a fan base that's starving for a win over a regional rival. And you had 2 chances this year, and you got to get at least one of them. So they've put themselves in this position. So I'll be interested to see how it turns out. But we'll be there Saturday, as usual. We'll have all the coverage. You can check it on the site. We'll have our usual stuff, a lot of stuff Pro Football Focus, some observations, time on it from old Jared right there, and a lot more stuff. So I hope you tune in. Enjoy the game. Yes, it's not Maryland opener, but it is West Virginia football back in Morgantown with fans at the stands. So I think that is something to be excited for. So we'll see you then. Anything else you have, Jared?
Yeah, just wanted to remind everybody, West Virginia plays Saturday at 5 Eastern time. Home opener, Milan Push Bar Stadium. Tailgating is allowed. So I expect the crowd to be out in full force. I expect it to be an electric atmosphere. And maybe we'll get lucky with some chicken parm back in the press box. But until probably this weekend or sometime next week, thanks for tuning in to Musings from the Mountains, and we'll talk to you soon.